B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Thursday, August 1st, 2019. Part 2 of the Democratic debate in Detroit last night. Joe Biden was the target of attacks from just about everybody except for Andrew Yang. And Tulsi Gabbard lowered the boom on Senator Kamala Harris. We'll get detailed comments on that for you coming up in the second half of today's podcast. I want to begin with other news, including the Washington Post and New York Times reporting that Democrats in the House now have achieved more than 50% of their membership, their caucus, supporting various terms related to impeachment, an impeachment inquiry, or even full-blown impeachment. And during this break that began for the House on Monday, and the Senate will break until after Labor Day, starting either today or tomorrow, we have seen a daily trickle of Democrats saying that, well, you know, I read that Mueller report, and then he came up and testified, and now I've decided that we are duty-bound to pursue some sort of impeachment against this president. Now, as I mentioned, it is fuzzy because this impeachment inquiry is, a term that allows Chairman Nadler at the Judiciary Committee to essentially declare, maybe with a committee vote but not with a full vote of the House, that they are pursuing impeachment-related powers and processes. And I am still not sure that this is going to go anywhere. And because Speaker Pelosi is so cautious about this, my fear is that we might wind up with a strong majority of Democrats supporting impeachment in the House, but they will be blocked, and then they might force the issue. But because of the way the Democrats have slow-walked this, prevented momentum from building, and fundamentally failed to challenge Republicans to take a clear position, this is fraught with risks. And I still maintain, you may agree or disagree, I can respect those who don't agree, that there is a duty to impeach. The crimes of obstruction, the crimes that Michael Cohen has pled guilty to and named the president as the guy who told him to commit those crimes, that is plenty to form the basis for an impeachment enterprise. But because Trump knows that the Democrats are not unified, Trump can smell that Pelosi is afraid that the process could lead to a vote in the Senate where the Republicans would not remove Trump, and therefore he could claim some sort of victory and exoneration. But the other prospect, which is to rely on one of the 24 Democratic candidates to float to the top, to be able to take on and beat Donald Trump, given the way he'll run a campaign, the racist tones that he will embrace, and the Republican election fraud system, this voter suppression, the outright fraudulent vote counting. And, as I have pointed out before, while Pelosi is trying to protect the people who gave her the speakership, the freshmen elected last November, many from purple or even red districts. And here's one of them, Kim Schreier of the state of Washington, who narrowly flipped a Republican seat in 2018, announced her support for an impeachment inquiry. And she is not the first of the group which Pelosi is trying to protect. And so if they have the balls to say, this may cost me my seat, I may be a one-term member of the House, but damn it, I cannot overlook this president's behavior and his obvious impeachability, And as I've said, there is no guarantee that without impeachment, Pelosi will retain the speakership. The Democrats will retain control of the House. It is really up for grabs, and a series of Trump tweets, whether it's about the squad or if he tweet targets other members, I fear that he could turn that tide and shift that majority. And then he gets reelected. They haven't pursued impeachment. The Republicans regained control of the House where impeachment must originate. And we're not only stuck with him for 4 more years, but he will have even more impunity than he exhibits today. So, my friends, I understand that this is a difficult issue for many on the American left. And I also recognize that many people support impeachment because of their false beliefs in Russiagate. This is not a pretty picture. It's not perfect in any way, shape, or form. But when you look at the available options, that's why I come down forcefully in favor of impeachment, irrespective of the cost. I don't think you can control the damage. And I also believe that the American public might reward the Democrats if they actually show strong leadership and impeach the MF. So here is the latest baffling move by the Trump administration, ratcheting up tensions with Iran. The foreign minister, Javad Zarif, who is the guy who we would conduct talks with if the U.S. and Iran agreed to resume talks or start new talks. And Trump Co. has announced that he has personal sanctions imposed on him. And this is a gratuitous bit of whipped cream on top of the already gratuitous declaration that the Revolutionary Guard is a terrorist organization. And it has the impact of unifying the disparate elements in Iran, because Zarif is considered soft because he negotiated the nuclear deal with John Kerry, approved by 6 other nations plus Iran. And I really, can't even guess what strategery John Bolton believes this represents. So Mike Pompeo, who seems to be running just about everything, foreign policy, intelligence, he reiterated yesterday that the Iran policy, squeezing the country through sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and military pressure, is designed to force it to negotiate a more favorable nuclear deal. And Zarif is the guy who we know, if you exclude him from future talks, you might get an even more hardline Iranian representative. And Zarif said, who cares? I don't own any property or have any interests outside Iran, so the sanctions will not hurt him financially. It'll mainly restrict his travel to the U.S. and to the United Nations. And it also makes him a victim of Trump's buffoonery and bullying, and that can only help Iran. Danny Serzin has a strong piece published at TruthDig. He's a retired Army officer. He guested on our podcast recently. I'm quite impressed with him. And he notes that the United States has quietly reinserted soldiers into Saudi Arabia. And he said the reason given is that Iran, which he describes as the national security state's current favorite exaggerated villain. And he notes that Iran hasn't invaded anybody. The U.S. troop infusion is more preemptive than reactive. It's no matter. Few Americans or even most media or political elites, he says, seem to notice. And besides, he said, what could go wrong? Well, he answers his own question. Quite a lot can go wrong, actually. It has before. And he recites the history of the Khobar Towers and the fatwa, the declaration of war issued by Osama bin Laden. And his primary beef with the United States is that we had put our soldiers in the lands of Islam, the holiest of places. And Serzin says, well, the rest is history. The total cost, 7,000 American troops dead, 244,000, that's a low ball number for foreign civilians killed, and about $6 trillion in U.S. tax money wasted. And he reminds us of Chalmers Johnson, the concept of blowback. And he says maybe the U.S. will get lucky and suffer only a few terror attacks on its troops in Saudi Kingdom. Then again, Washington might just blunder into an unnecessary, unwinnable, unethical war with the Islamic Republic of Iran, a nation of 80 million, and further destabilize an already precarious region. The nightmare but totally possible scenario would be the radicalization of new Saudi and transnational jihadis who then take the fight to American shores. The Trump administration claims that they have a workable agreement with the nation of Guatemala. And I believe that we have crammed down an unworkable concept of having people who want to claim asylum, who are on their way to the United States, who come from Honduras or El Salvador, they'll just drop into Guatemala, file for asylum, and then wait there for word from Gringo Land that their case is going to be heard. Now, Guatemala's government under Jimmy Morales is deeply unpopular. He is either termed out or not running. The election is coming up in less than 2 weeks. And both candidates who are in the finals oppose this deal. And so does, as I pointed out yesterday, the top court in Guatemala, which has said that the government can't engage in this agreement with the United States without the assent of their legislature. And we've got Kevin McAleenan, the new head of Homeland Security, or I guess that's his job. And he's there in Guatemala. He is dropping $40 million to build up their ability to create an asylum system. They don't have one. They're just going to, like Nescafe, add water. And he's trying to smooth talk, saying that U.S. officials believe that most Salvadorans and Hondurans won't stay in Guatemala. They'll simply return home if they're forced away from the United States. So this is another policy whose intention is simply to send a message to people that you cannot get into the United States, so don't try. And they don't care what process is used, whether it will work. It's just a big PR campaign, in my view. And it's possible that it could work like a backdoor deportation mechanism for Hondurans and Salvadorans, an alternative to releasing them into the interior of the United States. But in Trump's obsession to block all brown people from making it over our border, this is just an incoherent and irrational approach, as I say, that is mostly about the optics. You are not welcome in the United States, so go back where you came from. Go back to your shithole country. Now Trump has announced new tariffs on China. Effective September 1st, an additional tariff of 10% on the remaining $300 billion of goods and products coming from China into our country. This does not include the $250 billion already tariffed at 25%. Now, it was just yesterday that the Federal Reserve lowered interest rates in the United States to try to ease the impact, the negative impact on our economy of Trump's trade war. The talks have been suspended. Trump has publicly said he doesn't expect any progress until after the 2020 election. And so we're stuck with a trade war, and this guy just arbitrarily keeps jacking up tariffs and announcing new ones. And I believe he has widely exceeded his presidential authority to impose tariffs. But there is nobody to check or balance his madness. And I mentioned about Trump meddling with the Federal Reserve. I mean, he was tweeting before and after their announcement of the rate cut yesterday. And they're supposed to be independent. And the brilliant total genius, or whatever he calls himself, stable genius, he's just got to intervene because, he thinks so much of himself. And so now he has intervened in a case where he has ordered the Navy to withdraw medals that were awarded to the prosecutors who ran the court-martial of Eddie Gallagher. Now, if you know about Gallagher, he was on SEAL Team something. He was turned in by members of his own platoon. They accused him of stabbing a captured and wounded teenage fighter repeatedly in 2017. He was also charged with obstruction of justice for threatening to kill the SEALs who reported him. Now, it's fair to say that the prosecutors screwed up this trial a lot. The lead attorney was removed from the case after being caught attaching tracking software to email messages sent to defense lawyers. And then the trial was upended when another SEAL who had been given immunity said that he was the only one who killed the captive, exonerating, at least through his testimony, Chief Gallagher. So this is an ugly case from beginning to end. And Trump is taking the side of an accused war criminal who wasn't completely exonerated, but came pretty close. Recently, I've reported on the lawsuit brought by Texas businessman Ed Bukowskis, and he claims that there is evidence that Julian Assange has told people that Russia didn't hack the DNC, that it was an insider job. And the key witness here, who apparently has changed her story, according to Bukowskis, is Ellen Ratner. And as I've explained, I've known Ellen Ratner for over 15 years, and she served as a vendor to Democratic groups when they would hold conferences inside the Beltway. And I attended some of those conferences, worked on Radio Row, and I know Ellen a little bit. Now, her brother, the late Michael Ratner, founder of the Center for Constitutional Rights, was one of the attorneys for Assange at one point. And Ellen Ratner, in an interview that was broadcast right after the 2016 election, said that she had been in London the week before the election and talked to Julian Assange. And this is an important claim because, as you know, I continue to doubt the Mueller investigation's limited hangout conclusions that provide no evidence that Russia hacked the DNC and gave those emails to WikiLeaks. And so I want to thank Jerry Frazia, who sent me another link to the Florida Squeeze, where they have posted this video clip, and I'm going to play the audio for you right now.
By the way, just FYI, I met with...
take a WikiLeaks.
I spent 3 hours with Julian Assange on Saturday at the Ecuadorian embassy
Get
in
this.
London.
Listen to this. Go ahead.
Well, I did.
Yeah.
But one of the things he did say is that the leaks were not from... they were not from the Russians. They were an internal source from the Hillary campaign or from somebody that knew Hillary, an enemy. He does not think they're from Russians. And he said Russia got credit for something WikiLeaks should have gotten credit for.
Wow.
So that's Ellen Ratner. That was broadcast shortly after the 2016 election. And it is critical to any reopening of the Russiagate narrative. Now, my friend Ray McGovern, publishing at Consortium News today, is pretty optimistic, much more than I am, about what John Ratcliffe might do if he is successfully confirmed as Director of National Intelligence. Now, I share the concerns of establishment people that Ratcliffe has very limited experience with intelligence. He is a deep loyalist of Donald Trump, and I don't have any confidence that if he investigated the origins of Russiagate, that it would be a fair investigation. But Ray McGovern has a different view. He heard Ratcliffe interviewed on Fox News with Maria Bartiromo. What I do know as a former federal prosecutor is it does appear that there were crimes committed during the Obama administration, claiming that Democrats accused Trump of a crime and then tried to reverse engineer a process to justify that accusation. Now, as you know, I'm skeptical of the Russiagate narrative, and I think that the way that was just quoted there is not out of bounds. But John Ratcliffe, he has shown himself to be so loyal to Trump that it's really hard to believe that there could be a fair investigation. And Ray notes that one of the lead investigators is John Durham, the U.S. Attorney for Connecticut, and that when he has been called upon to do investigations like this in the past, that he essentially covered up for CIA misdeeds. He was asked to investigate the destruction of the torture tapes by high-ranking CIA officials. And when no charges were brought, he didn't utter a peep. So Ray is fair and balanced. He is honest about the role of John Durham. And also we have Michael Horowitz, the Inspector General for the Department of Justice. And Ray asks, will Durham's role be limited by deep state gun-shy Trump, or will he be given the latitude to proceed with a no-holds capital B barred, so to speak? That's a reference to Bill Barr, the Attorney General. Now, as you know, I have deep questions about the role of the deep state, including John Brennan, in promoting the Russiagate narrative. I also believe that the FISA court simply has no place in the American judicial system. It has been lied to and abused, and it should be dismantled. But I don't believe any of this will come from an investigation run by Bill Barr, his hand-picked investigator, or John Ratcliffe. But Ray has a different view. I have linked to his article, and I encourage you to check it out if you're so inclined. The link is available in the show file for this podcast at peterbcollins.com. Every day I pause to thank the people who support my work with your subscriptions to this podcast. People like Carla Mahoney, I hope your back has improved, Carla, Ben Brotman, Patrick Garay, and Steve Wozinski. They each kick in just a few dollars each month, and I invite you to do it too. I could use your help. I have lost subscribers because of my pointed opinions, and I guess some people just move on to other podcasts or other outlets. But I do need a wave of new support right now, and I hope you'll provide it. So drop by peterbcollins.com, click on menu, click on Become a Subscriber, and when you hit the sign-up page, I think you know what to do. So Joe Biden was clearly the target, and every Democrat on the stage attacked him last night in Detroit except for Andrew Yang. And by the way, Yang gave me a podcast interview well over a year ago where he detailed his $1,000 a month for every American adult plan. And I think he's an interesting guy, and he had some good comments in the debate last night. But all the attention was on Joe Biden, and from beginning to end, he really showed some of his weaknesses. So when the candidates were first introduced, it was just Biden and Harris on the stage for a second. And when she walked out, Joe Biden was heard in a hot mic saying, "Go easy on me, kid." Now, I also saw Joe in the post-debate spin room, putting his hands on guys' shoulders and that kind of touchy stuff that Joe does. And for him to tell Kamala Harris to go easy on me, kid, oh gosh. That is just so stupid. And at the end of the debate, there is a lot of attention devoted to the fact that he tried to give out his website and appeared to confuse it with a text message portal and left everybody confused. He said, if you agree with me, go to Joe 30330 and help me in this fight. And that kind of shows that Joe doesn't use the internet or probably text messaging either. But even before he got to that, he fumbled his rehearsed lines in his closing remarks, where he talked about, he wanted to say that 4 years of Trump would have been treated as an aberration, considered an aberration. But he fumbled it. He said 4 more years of Trump. And then instead of correcting himself, he said, but we can't allow 8 more years of Trump. And of course, that is not even constitutionally possible. So Joe really, in my view, he demonstrated last night that he is a man of his past, and that if he is the Democratic nominee, Trump will run circles around him, making the campaign all about the perceived faults of Barack Obama. And the Democrats last night finally broke through, and they took the halo off Barack Obama. They acknowledged that Obamacare comes up short, doesn't control costs, doesn't stop the profiteering of the insurance and pharma industries. And that came from many people on the stage. They also directly noted that Obama had deported 3 million people, far more than Trump has to date. And several candidates, repeatedly Bill de Blasio, pressed Biden to answer the question, and he never did. The question was, did you separate yourself from Obama's immigration policies? He was also put on the defensive by Kirsten Gillibrand for a 1981 op-ed that he signed. And he was attacked by Kamala Harris on the busing issue again. That was regurgitated by CNN. But also the opening exchange between Harris and Biden about Medicare for All and her modified plan and his modified plan. It was really a waste of time. They are just plans. And they talk about them like, they're all carved in stone, and that if I get elected, my plan is just going to be immediately adopted by the Congress. And only a few people referenced the efforts of Republicans to take health care away from people, to destroy Obamacare without any replacement or substitute of any kind. And so the debate moderators were not as tight with their time control last night. And we did hear some actual give and take, some actual debating. But Michael Bennet, the senator from Colorado, was out there representing the Republicans. He says that Medicare for All will make employer insurance illegal, take away insurance from half of the American public, and raise huge taxes on all. And those are Republican talking points. And he was called out on that. But it shows that the corporate Democrats are really very, similar to the Republicans. So I found that discussion, just kind of a waste of time. They're all trying to score points. Joe Biden saying, I'm going to have $1,000 deductible. And he was ticking off the benefits of his plan like a pitchman. So I didn't find that very valuable. Then they shifted to immigration, and Julian Castro, I think, did a good job parsing the difference between declaring those who cross the border criminal as opposed to civil penalties. And they used Michael Bennet once again to reflect the Republican point of view. And that's when Biden was asked, you deported more people than Trump. Would you return to that? He said, absolutely not. Asylum is not illegal. And then Castro said, well, it looks like one of us has learned the lessons of the past and one of us hasn't. And those comments are the kinds of things that Biden would be attacked for if he does become the nominee. He will be made to defend Obamacare, Obama's immigration policies. Even the protection for dreamers can be mischaracterized to attack Biden. And Jay Inslee cut through and said, we ought to mention that we are here because we are trying to set the stage to no longer allow a white nationalist in the White House. De Blasio, the mayor of New York, talked about the charade that we need comprehensive reform, we need to legalize the 11 million people who are here, and then he kept pressing Biden to answer the question about Obama's numbers on deportation. And that continued for a bit. Then we come back and talk about criminal justice, where Cory Booker channeled Peter B. Collins. Yes, I was cheering him on. I don't like Cory Booker, and I'm not going to support him for president. He's a corporate kind of tool. But on criminal justice, he espouses strong views, and he correctly chastised Biden for his sorry record on criminal laws that Joe Biden passed, including the crack cocaine law. And once, at one point, Biden reached a kind of point of exasperation, and he said, well, all these people are talking about things that occurred a long time ago, and now all of a sudden everybody's talking about how bad I am on these issues. So he played an Obama card. He said, Barack Obama had 10 lawyers investigate me on all this stuff. Obama chose me, said it's the best decision he made, and I'll take his judgment. So this is like Biden saying, I've got the Obama card, and everything I did was okay because Obama picked me and kept me for a second term. So then the surprise came when CNN, Jake Tapper, brought up the issue from the last debate of Biden and Harris over busing. And the surprise was not their exchange. It's when they turned to Tulsi Gabbard and tried to get her to pile on over the busing issue, and she just ignored that question. She said, I want to talk about the broken criminal justice system. And then she hammered the record of Kamala Harris as Attorney General here in California. And everything that Gabbard said was true. That she put 1,500 people in jail for marijuana and laughed when asked if she had smoked it. She blocked evidence that would have freed a man from death row. She kept people in prison to use them as cheap labor for the state of California, and she fought to keep the cash bail system in place. Harris was clearly unprepared. And she tried to use, campaign talking points and ultimately just said, well, hey, I'm opposed to the death penalty, which was not the issue that was raised in Gabbard's attack. So I turned to friends on Facebook last night, and I said, if you watch the Dem Prez Palooza tonight, please tell me your reaction to Gabbard's accurate attack on Harris's record as California AG. Was it bad form? How does it affect your views of Gabbard and Harris? Here's Derek. I only regret that Gabbard failed to mention Harris' failure to prosecute Mnuchin. Rich Robinson, who's an old friend of mine, a Democratic campaign consultant and a staunch Biden supporter, he said he wrote kaboom. And then BTW. By the way, Tulsi Gabbard is my congresswoman, and I like Kamala. David Earnhardt, documentary filmmaker from Nashville. I thought Tulsi nailed it, right on the mark. And now she is trending #1 on Google search. Great tactical choice and well executed. Steve Perona, the right issue, the wrong person. Still on the fence about Kamala, Tulsi should return to Congress. The question is why Booker didn't deliver this blow. Then Vicky Lee, siding with Harris and raising a red herring that Harris used in a smear. She writes, however, in the after interviews, Kamala said it's hard to take her criticism seriously from someone who is an Assad apologist. Kamala should have said that on stage. All that said, Kamala still has some splaining to do. And then our friend Joe Clarici argues with Vicky Lee about the Assad apologist talking point, calling it intellectually dishonest, and they exchange a few notes about that. Then Luke says Tulsi Gabbard spent a significant part of her adult life in support of gay conversion therapy and is an Assad apologist. I find it mind-numbingly absurd that some leftists treat her like the second coming of RFK. And Jason Spitzer says, yes, and she turned away from those views over 15 years ago. As for the apologist label, it's nonsense. Then Ford Green posts, Tulsi executed a measured, well-aimed, and accurate confrontational shot. Harris confirmed its accuracy when her post-debate response stooped to the Assad-based ad hominem deflection and attack instead of respecting the truth by giving a direct, honest answer. Not at all bad form by Tulsi. Instead, to have let Harris' record pass without challenge would have shown a lack of courage, a form by which nature is piss poor. An elected public official reveals essential data when instead of doing her best to give an honest response, she resorts to a dodgy ad hominem attack. If she'll do it once, she'll do it again. Such behavior shows a low personal standard and fundamental lack of impeccability in moral character. Then Jason Ben-Levy says Kamala's feigned anger act wears thin after an hour. Then John Schoeneboom, he lives in England, Assad apologist, a silly thing that official narrative regurgitationists say. Then Ian Berman, the theme of last night was ADA, avoid direct assaults. Hitman de Blasio was out to sink Biden, and Biden never answered one direct question. Surprisingly, Gabbard also torpedoed Harris mid-bow as well. Jay Cryer, I loved it, the highlight of the debate. Rick Brenner, my cousin worked on a California campaign opposing Harris that she barely won. He predicted this and feels there's a lot more coming. Obama still maintains a 95% approval rating with Dems, so not sure why anyone thinks attacking him is a good idea. I think the ganging up against Biden backfired as it was way too obvious. The first night was way more issue-driven rather than last night's circular firing squad. Christine Kraft briefly wrote, Gabbard right, but going nowhere. Sue Wilson, bottom line, Kamala Harris is carrying a lot of baggage, and now the media should do its own investigation of her record. David Swanson, the question is why such forbidden information until she blurted it out. Oh, why it was such forbidden information. Hours and hours of endless, mindless punditry on numerous networks, and it never came up. We all knew it. It wasn't secret. It was forbidden. And just a couple of more notes. One is that based on the Democratic rules, only 7 of the current candidates have qualified for the debate stage on September 12th and 13th in Houston. And they are Biden, Booker, Buttigieg, Kamala Harris, O'Rourke, Sanders, and Elizabeth Warren. Andrew Yang has surpassed the donation and needs another poll boost. Amy Klobuchar she's shy about 10,000 donors. And Tom Steyer, the impeachment activist and climate change activist, meets the standards in 2 polls but doesn't have 130,000 donors because people expect a billionaire to pay for his own campaign. So the herd will be thinned by mid-September. And it'll be very interesting to see if they're uninvited to the debates, will candidates bail out of the race altogether? And my final note is that CNN failed to explain to us when there were protests and people were hustled out of the Fox Theater in Detroit. And the initial chants were Fire Pantaleo, referring to the officer who has not been charged for the chokehold death of Eric Garner. And it was mostly aimed at Mayor de Blasio. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. You can share it all over the place. You'll find it on YouTube. I'm Peter B.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails.